speaking of pirates in the Age of Discovery, Blackbeard Edward Teach is definitely one of the most notorious ones. He has been described in various film and television works, but his rise and journey are rarely mentioned. Today's program is here to be thorough. Please help share and subscribe to the Earth Archives channel before the show starts. Thank you. Edward Teach was born in Bristol, England in 1680. At that time, Britain was in turmoil and was at war with Spain, its maritime rival for many years. As a result, the British government acquiesced to some armed civilian ships attacking and robbing passing foreign merchant ships at sea. Their targets were mainly Spanish merchant ships, and the young Blackbeard became a sailor on such armed civilian ships. In 1713, the Anglo-Spanish naval war came to an end, and Spain was defeated. According to the Treaty of Utrecht, the Strait of Gibraltar was not only ceded to Britain, but also gave Britain a monopoly on the slave trade, making the British Empire a veritable maritime hegemon. Then the triangular trade began to rise. The so-called triangular trade is international trade centered on the slave trade. Shipped to plantations in the West Indies and South American colonies, sold to plantation owners, and then bought sugar, tobacco, etc. from the colonies and returned to England. The triangular trade brought a steady stream of money to Britain, and many people became very rich in a short period of time. In such a trade atmosphere, the original armed civilian ships were like a fish in water, and many sailors became professional pirates. Later, they developed to the point where they not only robbed merchant ships of other countries, but even British ships themselves. As a result, the entire Caribbean Sea became a hunting ground for pirates. When the Queen ordered armed civilian ships to stop attacking merchant ships, she discovered what it means to play with fire and burn himself. It was against this historical background that Blackbeard began his thrilling pirate career. The year 1716 was a turning point in the career for Blackbeard. In this year, he began to work as a pirate with the famous Captain Hornigold. Later, Captain Hornigold appointed him on a ship. He served as commander on the plundered boat. Blackbeard served Captain Hornigold loyally for 2 years. Later in the Caribbean, Captain Hornigold successfully robbed a large merchant ship that was selling slaves and transporting jewelry from Africa to the Americas. It was a very luxurious ship built in the Netherlands and equipped with 36 cannons. Galleon. At that time, in addition to a large number of slaves, the ship was also loaded with gold, silver and precious stones. After Captain Hornigold obtained the ship, he transferred it to Edward Teach as a reward. Blackbeard was extremely excited to take over this large and powerful merchant ship, renamed it the Queen of Revenge, and started from scratch. Blackbeard had just started to fight alone, and he became famous on his first voyage. The pirates of the early 18th century were under the banner of serving Her Majesty the Queen, so they always tried every means to avoid the Royal Navy of the British Empire. But Blackbeard is a born outlaw. What may seem like a catastrophic disaster to others may turn out to be the most exciting challenge to him. So as soon as he went to sea, he went straight to the British Coast Guard on the East Coast. At the naval port, he brazenly robbed the British merchant ship, Ellen. This surprised the British naval warships anchored in the harbour and quickly left the harbour to intercept them. The British warship opened fire first. Blackbeard drove the Revenge Queen ship to avoid the opponent's bombardment, and saw the opportunity to advance at full speed and hit the British warship midway. This suicidal desperado approach frightened the British Royal Navy. They had never seen such a method of fighting before, and they were at a loss for a while. The pirates under Blackbeard took the opportunity to shoot wildly on the decks of their guns. The British officers and soldiers suffered heavy casualties and fled in panic. From then on, Blackbeard became famous all over the world, and all ships traveling along the Atlantic coast fled when they heard his name. Just when people were panicked by the name Blackbeard, he suddenly disappeared without a trace, causing the British Navy that pursued him to return in vain. 2 years later, when this incident was gradually forgotten by people, he quietly appeared again. From then on, almost all ships on the route from Virginia in the north to Honduras in the south were within the scope of his robbery, and many merchant ships became his bag. After 18 months of crazy robbery, Blackbeard's loot piled up. In some port cities in North Carolina, USA, he disposed of many stolen goods at low prices. What is even more unimaginable is that people soon discovered that gold and money were not this man's only hobbies. His biggest hobby was to torture people for fun until they were tortured to death. Once, when a captured captain showed a little resistance to Blackbeard, he cut off the captain's nose and ears, and forced him to eat the bloody ears and nose on the spot. The most cruel thing is that Blackbeard not only kills innocent people indiscriminately, but but also does not spare the men who work with him. It is said that whenever he looted a batch of treasure and needed to bury it, he would take a sailor with him. However, when the burial was halfway done, he would suddenly attack and kill the sailor from behind, and bury his body with the treasure. In May 1718, Blackbeard succeeded in what could be called the most daring raid in his entire pirate career. He led 4 pirate ships to blockade Charleston, the capital of South Carolina, looted all the ships in the harbor, and then released a turn on the fire. In an instant, all the ships were engulfed in flames. During this robbery, he kidnapped many hostages and members of the city council, threatened to chop off the heads of the hostages, and demanded a huge ransom from the city government in exchange for the hostages' freedom. Under Blackbeard's brutal coercion, the city government had to comply with his demands. When Blackbeard's pirate fleet left the port of Charleston, they not only obtained a large amount of cotton, tobacco and other items, but also extorted a ransom of £1.5 million. This huge ransom is enough for him to enjoy for the rest of his life. So, he wanted to take the opportunity to break up the gang and keep the treasure for himself. In order to get rid of those accomplices who were with him through life and death, he set up a vicious plan and drove the Queen Anne and Revenge and 2 other ships to an isolated island and deliberately ran aground, allowing his men to land to inspect and repair. Another 40 confidants took the opportunity to quickly leave the island by boat. 2 days later, the English Major Bonnet accidentally drove his sailboat to this deserted island and rescued all the pirates left behind by Blackbeard. At that time, although most of the city council members in South Carolina were intimidated by Blackbeard's power, there was one exception: Alexander Spotswood, the governor of Virginia. This man was determined to kill Blackbeard at all costs, and Blackbeard's ruthlessness towards his associates also angered all the pirates who came back alive at that time. They contacted many businessmen and planters who had been harmed by Blackbeard and found Spotswood together, determined to revenge him. Soon, the governor issued an announcement encouraging the public to help the government capture Blackbeard and his associates. The city government offered a reward of £100 for catching Blackbeard himself, £40 for catching other pirate captains, £20 for catching his generals, £15 for catching junior officers, and £10 for catching ordinary pirates. In addition, Governor Spotswood also asked England's naval base for help. The Royal Navy dispatched 2 battleships, the Pearl and the Ream, loaded with more than 60 sailors and a large number of weapons, to help capture Blackbeard. Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard was the commander-in-chief of the 2 battleships. In the autumn of 1718, Spotswood received a tip that Blackbeard's flagship, Adventurer, was anchored in Ocracoke Bay, and he immediately sent the 2 warships to capture it. At this time, Blackbeard also received a tip from the governor's secretariat who was inside it. At night, they drank all night long on the shore, and then returned to the pirate ship equipped with 9 artillery pieces aboard. On the afternoon of November 17, 1718, the 2 sides began to exchange fire. From a distance, Lieutenant Maynard saw Blackbeard's flag hanging on the top of the mast of the other party's pirate ship, a blood-red heart with a white skull printed on a black background. In May 1718, Blackbeard succeeded in what could be called the most daring raid in his entire pirate career. He led 4 pirate ships to blockade Charleston, the capital of South Carolina, looted all the ships in the harbor, and then released a group of pirates. In an instant, all the ships were engulfed in flames. During this robbery, he kidnapped many hostages and members of the city council, threatened to chop off the heads of the hostages, and demanded a huge ransom from the city government in exchange for the hostages' freedom. Under Blackbeard's brutal coercion, the city government had to comply with his demands. When Blackbeard's pirate fleet left the port of Charleston, they not only obtained a large amount of cotton, tobacco and other items, but also extorted a ransom of £1.5 million. This huge ransom is enough for him to enjoy for the rest of his life. Soon, Alexander Spotswood issued a proclamation, encouraging the general public to help the government capture Blackbeard and his associates. The city government offered a reward of £100 for catching Blackbeard himself, £40 for catching other pirate captains, £20 for catching his generals, £15 for catching junior officers, and £10 for catching ordinary pirates. At the same time, Governor Spotswood also asked the British naval base for help. The Royal Navy dispatched 2 battleships, the Pearl and the Ream, loaded with more than 60 sailors and a large number of weapons, to help capture Blackbeard. Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard was the commander-in-chief of the 2 battleships. In the autumn of 1718, Spotswood received a tip that Blackbeard's flagship, Adventurer, was anchored in Ocracoke Bay, and he immediately sent the 2 warships to capture it. At this time, Blackbeard also received a tip through his insider the government secretariat. On the afternoon of November 17, 1718, the two sides began to exchange fire. From a distance, Lieutenant Maynard saw Blackbeard's flag hanging on the top of the mast of the other party's pirate ship, a blood-red heart and a white skull printed on a black background. The battle started at 3 p.m. on November 17, 1718. Due to the complex terrain of Oxford Bay, with shoals and reefs everywhere, the ships at both sides ran aground as soon as the battle began, and the naval battle turned into a land battle, but Blackbeard's gunner still hit the rim accurately, and Captain Baker died immediately. When Blackbeard and his men climbed aboard the Pearl, Maynard, who was fighting alone, only had 12 soldiers who could still fight. During the war, Blackbeard was shot in the stomach by Maynard and died at the hands of the remaining 12 living soldiers. Afterwards, when Lieutenant Maynard and the soldiers cleaned up the battlefield, they found a total of 25 stab wounds and 5 gunshot wounds on Blackbeard. He ordered his men to chop off Blackbeard's head and feed the body to the sharks. As soon as Blackbeard died, his buried treasure became the target of many people's searches. At that time, after Blackbeard was killed by Lieutenant Maynard, Royal Navy soldiers searched all the places on Blackbeard's pirate ship where the treasure could be hidden. But they searched around and found only 145 bags of cocoa beans, 11 barrels of wine, 1 barrel of indigo and 1 bale of cotton, but no gold, silver or jewelry. Since then, countless theories about Blackbeard's missing treasures have begun to circulate, because all merchant ship captains who have been robbed by Blackbeard know that he must have hidden a large amount of treasures. But where are those treasures? As a result, all daily necessities and residences related to Blackbeard have become the targets of treasure hunters. After many years, they finally admitted that Blackbeard was so cunning that he left no words or clues, let alone any treasure map. Not only that, Blackbeard declared shortly before his death that only the devil and himself could find the location of his treasure. In 1997, 270 years after the Blackbeard pirate fleet's flagship, Revenge Queen, sank, an American diver finally discovered traces of it. Archaeologists later determined that the wreckage of the Revenge Queen was located in the so-called Hurricane Corridor, 200 meters off the coast of North Carolina. As a result, people began to look forward to fishing out a batch of treasures underwater. Of course, this is just the wish of the treasure hunter. It is not clear when this wish will be realized and become a reality. It is also said that Lieutenant Maynard took the severed head as a warning and took it back to Virginia by hanging it on the ship's rafters. A week later, Blackbeard's head was boiled, wrapped in silver foil, and made into a wine glass. Later, people used it in many taverns until this silver-plated pirate head mysteriously disappeared on the east coast of the United States.